currency. It fuels trade and open markets and things like that. To know that we are in this, to know that these countries, beyond the paper that has been ratified, that there is the action then, and understanding that it actually is for the benefit of countries and persons, that everybody's swimming and thriving in the same waters.
Two things. One, I think a lot of creation awareness, creation. People need to understand the community, and we need to create forums, even at every country, making people understand the community is working for them. For example, if, for example, you wake up now and say, I want to go to Uganda, and you use your national ID, in order to use our passport, the citizen will feel, yes, it is working for us. If, for example, we have what we call the common tourist, destination, where we are promoting the community as a single destination. If you are a tourist coming from Europe and you get a visa, for example, for Kenya, you use the same visa to go to Uganda. That is a single tourist visa, and it's already happening. Single tourist visa. These are real things that are happening, and if people know, and that's what I'm saying is about awareness. How many people know, for example, that you can use your national ID to move from Kenya to Rwanda? How many people know, for example, with your visa, if you obtain your visa in Europe or in Americas, wherever, and coming to Kenya, you can use the same visa to travel to Tanzania or to anything. So benefits are there, but I think it becomes also a collective responsibility of all of us to create awareness, to make sure that indeed we make the citizens of East Africa aware that it is working for them and this is the status. How do we do this? We do this by through even the members of parliament at the country level. They need to know these things because they're the ones who are representing people. We need to see more programs. We need to see even at everyone, a lot of programs happening. And that is now taking the community closer to the people. And that's what we've been trying as much as possible. If you realize for the last, we've been having the sittings of parliament in Uganda. And the other month, the sittings of parliament were in Uganda. We had the parliamentary sports or interparliamentary in Juba. The idea is to create more awareness for people to know this community is working for them and it is their thing. But if we keep silent and sit possibly in Arusha, people will never know basically what is happening. And so that's why we are saying that awareness creation is critical at a time like this, but also create for us where we listen and understand what citizens want. Because that's why we are there for them.
Indeed.
Yeah.
One often forgets just how important the lessons of history are. We look at the European Union and we marvel at how it is they seem to be working, and we forget that the thing that probably catalyzed the European Union to ensure that it got to where it was a war. 2 wars to be specific, but that Second World War, there was a need by the Europeans to create something that would guarantee some lasting peace among themselves. Because the first idea of a union was actually between businessmen, as you say. Coal mining and steel institutions, that sort of like came together. But historically, this issue of coming together, we began it before even the Europeans. We started ours in 1917.
Correct.
Long before them. We even had an East African community which was functioning. It functioned.
Correct.
Until 1977. It functioned. So we've had an experience of working something out, seeing it work. We have homegrown lessons to learn from. And when I hear you saying meetings that are East African community based are being held in different countries, it is an excellent way of spreading the East African community message. However, I have to ask, since it's your office that has the mandate to carry out these things, what is the structure that you have in place to ensure that there is not just a continuation, but there is an upscaling of these things so that everything that we see moving forward, the East African message takes dominance, so that one doesn't think of Uganda, one thinks of East Africa. When something happens, we think East Africa. How do you package these things so that, forget the members of parliament who are in the East African community, they're already there. Our local politicians, how do we ensure that this particular conversation, because everything I've heard you say, there are very many things that are happening. There are very many things that are done. But what is equally sure, nobody knows about them.
Correct.
So how do we get this message out?
Basic things. If you go to government offices today, and I hope you have even buildings like this, if you have the national flag, you have the East African flag.
Yep.
When you are singing the national anthem, we also sing the ESC
East African
anthem,
anthem.
the East African anthem. And that is to say, what remains in many people is that why two anthems? And using that could be also one way of making every citizen understand about the East African community. And so even our own leaders, the political leaders, the members of parliament, they need to understand why the community and for what. So I think we have gone even further to create what we call regional integration committees in parliaments. Committees that are standalone, basically to deal with regional integration. And that is to ensure that maybe members of parliament understand the whole thing. Yeah, I understand what the integration is, why is it for them, how is it working for their people, etc. But also schools. If you go to some schools in Tanzania, in the morning, you'll find that every single child in the street, they understand what is their ESC anthem. They can sing it. They can do it. So I think it's about putting more energy, more pressure to ensure that people understand that the community is there, is to work for them. Remember, and you rightly said, that the community, we were there in the beginning, but it collapsed. Remember, it is not in the interest of others in the world to have a united East Africa. And therefore, they will do whatever it is to ensure that we don't. And when they made us now, divided us, they went ahead and united themselves in their own ways, and they are making good progress. They have their common currency. They have one country, strategic plan, and everything. Here we are, not in the same page.
This is the thing, and I think that maybe is one hugely important element, that there obviously will be a challenge, and then, I mean, conspiracy theorists are, rife, who would say, look, perhaps one of the reasons why we have not seen some of these things happen is that perhaps there is an underhanded move to make sure it doesn't. Because the threat of a united East Africa, of an East African community, and then being able to trade on a global level, being able to make decisions about what happens with the resources. Just the other day, we've seen another mineral that has come out of DRC. No telling what the scramble already is to see how that can be controlled. But if there was a united East African community who was working on all of these elements as you speak of, then obviously somebody on the other side of the pond is not really happy with that. So are these not matters then that need to really be looked at to say, look, guys, we stand to benefit a great deal if we do come together as a community and actually work on these things beyond just hearsay. Say what you want about people like Gaddafi, but it seems to have an idea about what he was speaking of when he said African countries need to come together and work for themselves. This is where the resources, this is where some of the greatest minds are. Why then can we not seem to get it right? Do you think that there are those who might be working behind the scenes to make sure some of these things that we've been working on for the longest time don't come to fruition?
And I tell you that the world is a very complex place, because as you do want to do good, there are those who are pushing you back. So it's for you to understand, where do you want to go, and ensure that you don't get distracted by all these others. And for sure, the unity of Africa, leave alone East Africa, ought to have taken place. Looking at even the value, the natural resources that we have. DRC alone, the value is $24 trillion in terms of value of the resources. That is the equivalent of the economy
Again,
of the
how many
US.
trillion again?
24 trillion US
Dollars.
Yeah, the value of the minerals that exist in DRC alone. So the entire East Africa, if you're looking at all this, it could be possibly double that. What does that mean? It is bigger than some economies in the world. It's bigger than the United States. It's bigger than Europe. And now, with all this, if we exploit fully these resources, Africa becomes the continent. And therefore, the idea is that they all manner of things to make sure that, Africa does not take off. We continue now selling raw materials, to them. They use that raw material. They sell back. We sell coffee, raw material. They bring back Nescafe.
Yes.
5 times costlier than this. So why can't we add value to these things within East Africa? Why would we be saying the war in Ukraine and Russia, for example, we are getting affected by the spike of prices of basic commodities, when the size of East Africa is 4.9 million square kilometers? Huge land. Why can't we make use of this and produce food so that we don't over-depend on what is coming from...
So that we affect Ukraine.
Yes. So that, precisely. So that we get enough, we get food secure, and we start actually selling that food to the rest of the world. We have huge land, 4.9 million square kilometers, a population of close to 350 million people. That's a huge market. If we produce enough food, we can even sell the same food within our own people. We don't have to depend on what is happening in the world. And that is possible if we all of us put our minds together and say, we have an opportunity here for ourselves. Why do we have to go and depend? And when you see anything you see in Europe and part of the world, it comes from Africa. If there's raw material, these vehicles that are being produced in Japan and everywhere, the raw material is coming
from here. Speaking of the raw materials and the abundant resource that's in the DRC, let's talk about the peace process in the DRC.
Yes,
the East African community is of course working to bring in peace and restore peace in the DRC. What's the progress with that?
When the DRC became a full member last year in July, it became our responsibility and the responsibility of the leaders, the heads of states in particular, to say, we need to ensure that we restore peace in Eastern DRC. And we went further to say, we want to create 2 tracks to that. One is a political process, which is being led by a facilitator. A facilitator is the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, who is leading that, but also a military track. And before all along, and the problem that have been DRC, people have been using a single track of taking military there and stuff like that. But now we brought in a political track to say, let us now see how we can solve these problems on the table. Bring all the rebels together and talk to them. And for those who are unable now to agree to what is it, then the military comes to give a backup to political process. So what I'm saying is that we have already started the processes of negotiating with them and talking to them to ensure that we clear some of these problems. Good progress has been made. We have had 3 conclaves meetings actually to say in Nairobi, bringing all those rebels together to discuss and understand what their problem is. Now we have going to the 4th one, possibly to be in Goma or in Bujumbura, to assess progress. So I can say there's good progress. Good progress, why? Because already some of those forces that were in some places seem to have been now moving out of those places because of now the efforts that are being done to ensure we restore peace. So this is our key objective and key responsibility. Possibly it's going to occupy a priority actually.
As those things are happening, Daktari, 2 things emerge. One, we are seeing pockets of resistance and demonstrations against the sending of foreign military troops, particularly Kenyan troops. On the other hand, we are seeing on the political front the direct accusation of an EAC member state, Rwanda, of facilitating the M23 rebels. It's all over. Even now the EU is telling Rwanda, stop doing this. Even people who are outside the EAC are talking about it. How are those 2 affecting this process?
You see, we said earlier, and you agreed with me, that East Africa is rich in terms of minerals. And where there is that kind of huge resources, chances are that there'll be a lot of external influence in so many ways. So some of these things you'll be surprised. Much as, of course, they claim and complain and accuse countries in East Africa, this could be even coming from outside, not to ensure that there's no peace. But what I am saying is that there's political commitment by our leaders. And that's why they have seen this problem to say, let us sit together as leaders in East Africa and resolve this problem ourselves.
Is Rwanda committed to peace?
There is this commitment, and that's why in all those meetings they've been coming, in all those things they've been coming, they've been attending, and they've demonstrated, and in all those things that we have agreed with them, they are fulfilled as a country as Rwanda. So I can say, if there was no political commitment, I would tell you there was no political, but it is there, and by the leaders, all of them. And what we should be careful is, as we do this, as some of those external forces say, oh, don't do this, they could be the ones on the other hand using an underhand to say, to put to fuel, to make sure that it doesn't stop. Why? Because they have interest. They have interest. They could be have interest in some of the issues, some of the resources that we have in that part of East Africa. And so what I'm saying is that if we leave this external influence out and we remain ourselves as East Africa, we have enough resources within East Africa for all of us, and to make East Africa a first world. And it is possible.
Indeed. Daktari, we thank you very much for coming to visit us today,
Yeah.
and spending 1 hour with us, telling us about the East African community, the integration and the journey.
Yeah, I would invite all of us to love the community and get to know each one of us as a responsibility. I invite you to continue passing this same message because you have that platform. But also, most welcome to Arusha, where the community is based, and see how we can together drive this regional agenda together, because this is the future. The future of Africa, the future of East Africa is a united integration.
Asante sana.
Thank
The Honorable Dr. Peter Mutuku Mathuki is the Secretary General of the East African Community. He's been our guest. He's been explaining to us what is happening with the EAC, the journey towards full integration. We expect the East Africa Monetary Institute to be operationalized in the next few months, not years. People are saying this thing, maybe 2055, but hopefully in the next few months,
You're going to have the institute, but then after that,
the monetary